Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on monitoring and evaluation frameworks for gender-inclusive programs of the Philippines Partnership for Sustainable Agriculture. Um, I am Vijay Kalutan, the Communications and Engagement Manager of PPSA, and I will be your host for this afternoon session. To share briefly, PPSA, or as mentioned, the Philippines Partnership for Sustainable Agriculture, is a multi-stakeholder partnership platform that was catalyzed by Grow Asia and the Philippine Department of Agriculture to convene different stakeholders and to share best practices and discuss, various issues in agriculture and strategies for collective action. Currently, we are being supported by the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So before we officially begin, I think I would like to invite you for a photo opportunity. So inviting everyone to please open your cameras and show your biggest smile for a photo. But of course, we recognize that there may be some internet stability that you are having right now. So it's okay for you to not open your cameras. So we have 4 pages here of participants. So uh, please give your biggest smile 4 times. Okay, Kuya Rai. Thank you. You're on mute, Kuya Rai.
In the count of 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile.
Another one.
Another one. Wait, I'm gonna say this first. Okay, next. Sorry. Smile.
Then another one. This is 4 times.
Yes. Smile. One more. Okay.
And then last one, I think.
Yeah. Sorry. Smile. All right, we're done. Thank you. Back to you, DJ.
All right. Thank you so much, Kuya Rai. And of course, thank you to our participants. Now let us resume to our program. So before we officially start, I will just share you our webinar rules. So this webinar is being recorded so that we will make it available to our social media channels and to the general public who will not going to attend this session to share the knowledge and learning that we will obtain from the discussion. And kindly keep your mic on mute to avoid any background noise from interfering the program. And should you want to speak, use the raise hand function of the Zoom and wait to be acknowledged. And then for your questions or share your insights, you may use the chat box at any point of the presentation or the program. And then for any technical difficulties, just send us a chat or email us at secretariat@ppsa-ph.org. All right. Oops. Okay. So before we officially start, there's a poll that's going to be launched on your screen, and I want you to answer the question: which sector do you represent, or you are affiliated with? So, Kuya Rai, can you launch the poll, please? This is just to know how diverse the room is today. All right, I will give you around 10 to 15 seconds to respond to the poll. All right, I think that's it. The voting has, I think, ended. So As you can see in the poll result, we have a lot, of course, from the government. We also have representations from the NGOs, CSO, be it local or international. We also have representations from the academic or research institutions. We also have private sector, both MNCs and domestic companies. And of course, we have representations from farmer groups, cooperatives, and financial institutions. So I think this is a good mix of participants. So we're expecting different perspectives and insights, especially from the Q&A and sharing of insights during the open forum. All right, before I proceed, I'll just run down with the agenda for today. It's pretty straightforward. So we'll be having an introduction, which we are having now. And then we will get into the presentations and Q&A. So we have 3 presentations from different organizations. And then after the presentations and the Q&A, we will break into 3 rooms, which will be presenting the case studies and the applications, perhaps of the frameworks or the initiatives of various organizations. And then there will be a Q&A within the breakout session, and then we will get back to the plenary to share your key takeaways. So yeah, this is basically it. This is our session that will happen for today. So without further ado, I will introduce you to our first speaker. So as an overview, the webinar will present first the various MNE frameworks and then the gender inclusive programs. So our first speaker is an urban planner specializing in food systems policy and has worked and lived in the United States, South America, South Asia, and the Caribbean. She has 10 years of experience working with farmers, CSOs, subnational governments, and private companies on topics including food security, urbanization, climate adaptation, and economic impact assessments, among others. She also leads the implementation on the action plan for the ASEAN Guidelines on Responsible Agricultural Investment, or AGREA, as well as Grow Asia's gender mainstreaming initiatives. As Grow Asia's Sustainable Investment Lead, Erin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Vijay. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you for that kind introduction. I'm very much honored to be the first of a series of fantastic and very much engaged speakers that all of you will be hearing from today. So it's my pleasure to give you a short overview about some of the learnings that the Grow Asia Network has pulled together from all of our various partners across the region, and then to pass it on to the speakers who will give you deep dives into their own work. Next slide, please, Vijay. For those who may not be familiar with Grow Asia yet, I'll just quickly say that our core mandate and mission, of course, is to improve smallholder farmers' productivity, profitability, and environmental sustainability through multi-stakeholder partnerships. And it's with this mission that Grow Asia has begun to focus more intentionally on the experience of women farmers and women along agricultural value chains in each of our 6 country partnerships. Next slide, please. For those who don't know, in addition to the PPSA, the Grow Asia Network includes 5 other country partnerships, and we're also very well connected, of course, to the World Economic Forum's efforts on sustainable agriculture as well. I won't go into more detail here, but of course, if you're interested in learning about Grow Asia's other country partnerships and networks, you can find out more on our website. Next slide, please, Vijay. As I mentioned, about 2 years ago, Grow Asia set a very intentional impact goal for our work on gender mainstreaming, which you see here on the slide. And essentially, we're interested in ensuring that all of our work includes a gender consciousness. So that would be at the network level, at the country level, and at the level of our individual working groups, as well as focusing on amplifying the business case for women's empowerment across Grow Asia's 580 partners in 6 countries. We feel that this is incredibly important because we understand that we need to have various leverage points to encourage our partners to focus more on women in their value chains, and we see the business case as being one of those leverage points. Next slide, please. And you can jump to the next slide as well, Vijay. Just a quick overview about why women matter in this particular region. So women comprise 50% of the agricultural labor force in ASEAN. Globally, we know that women receive only 5% of agricultural extension services, but when men and women both receive, we know that productivity can increase many-fold. And then lastly, again, globally, there continues to be a yield gap between women and men farmers due to lower input use by women, but also the lack of training and services made available to them. And if we address this challenge, we can actually increase yield output by up to 4% and address some of the global food security challenges that we're facing today. Next slide, please. This slide gives you a list of reasons that GrowAsia's business partners have shared with us about why taking gender inclusive approaches and practices makes business sense. I won't go into incredible detail here because you'll have the opportunity to hear from 3 great case studies in the breakout sessions later, so please stick around for them. But to point out that there are many reasons that companies are finding to focus on both women farmers as customers, women farmers as laborers and within their own organizations, but also paying attention to trends that are occurring across the region, such as the feminization of farming, which we're seeing proved by researchers across Southeast Asia. Next slide. I'll talk for a few minutes now about understanding barriers that women farmers and women in agriculture face across Southeast Asia, again, to set the context for today. Next slide. We've identified 6 major constraints, although these are not by any means the only constraints that women face. I'll go into a little bit more detail about several of these, but just to say that women, of course, do have lower access to information, trainings, and knowledge, including digital solutions that could actually improve both their output and productivity, but also general well-being. We also see that there's limited downstream participation and upward mobility for women. So often women take on tasks such as weeding or harvesting or preparing food for laborers. And that work is considered less valuable than the work that men may be doing in those same value chains. We know women struggle with access to finance for many different reasons, but ironically, it's women who often make household and even farming financial decisions. So this is a huge issue that we need to look at. Time and mobility burdens continues to be a problem, particularly in light of COVID-19. And then these last 2 challenges I've outlined, but not filled in green, because we find that cultural and social norms and assumptions about women and that they may actually be a homogeneous group, which we know is not correct. But these 2 things are a bit harder to address with specific gender inclusive practices and programs, yet are very important to consider when we're designing these kinds of programs that are aiming to reach women. Next slide, please. I'll just give a couple of examples about some of these challenges that I've highlighted just now, but again, I won't go into detail now so that you'll have more time to hear from our speakers about the specifics. But for example, land ownership in parts of Indonesia determines whether women will be invited to participate in trainings in the first place. And in Myanmar, we find that actually men and women often have challenges accessing internet on mobile phones and may not have time to learn, which limits their opportunity to access additional information. Next slide, please. We find that in rice value chains in Vietnam, 80% of the traders are in fact men, which means that there's not a significant opportunity for women to participate in those downstream opportunities. Similarly, we see that there are fewer women participating in rice federations in places like Cambodia. Next slide. There are many challenges that women face with access to finance, so I've just put a few here. We know that only 1 in 10 women actually own and have the title to agricultural land in Southeast Asia, which is a huge issue because often land is used as collateral by farmers. Women's borrowing rates are much lower than men's across the region. And when you do a deep dive into certain countries, you find that often women are less financially literate than their male counterparts. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, women face greater time and mobility burdens because women are responsible for at least 80% of unpaid care and domestic work in addition to any farming responsibilities. We find that women actually spend as much as 3 times more on unpaid work than men. And we, of course, understand that COVID-19 is exacerbating this challenge worldwide, but particularly we see specific challenges related to women who run their own businesses in APAC, and that they no longer have time to maintain those businesses with the additional burdens they face with care as a result of COVID-19. Next slide, please. The last challenge that I'll zoom in on here is that we find in Southeast Asia that often women are considered a homogeneous group, but in fact, their women's experiences across Southeast Asia are incredibly varied, not just at the national level, but also at a provincial, district, or even further local level. And when programs are designed without understanding the local context that women experience, we can find that there are unintended consequences. For example, we have an interesting example from a partner in Vietnam who shared that when they introduced drum seeders, it actually made the tasks of women who owned their own land much easier. But those same drum seeders deprived landless women of the jobs that they had previously had in hand weeding the crops. So we had this unintended consequence that actually put many women out of a job. Next slide, please. Now that I've given you the landscape of some of the challenges that women face here in Southeast Asia, I'd like to highlight some of the takeaways from a recent report that Grow Asia published in February of this year, our Gender Landscape Mapping Report, where we worked with a consultant to interview 15 partners across the Grow Asia network in our 6 countries to understand what were some of the best practices in the solutions that they've developed to impact women farmers. And further, what were some of the collaborations that have made these programs possible and made the programs deliver results? Next slide, please. To give you a sense of who participated in our report, you can see the list here of our multinational company partners, local companies, and then CSOs, NGOs, international organizations, and government programs. So a wide range of inputs into this report. And as Vijay stated at the beginning, you'll be hearing from several of these organizations today. Next slide, please. When we interviewed these various organizations, we came to understand that there are often 5 categories of action that any single organization takes when they're looking to improve women farmers or women along value chains experiences, and that they fall into these 2 large buckets. One at the organization level, and then the second at the value chain level. Again, I won't go into more detail here, but my colleague will put the link to the report in the chat box so you can read into more detail there. Next slide, please. What I would like to share are what some of the common interventions that we identified when interviewing the partners for this report. So at the organization level, we find that often companies and NGOs are supporting mothers returning to work with specific policies that create spaces for them to meet their needs. That companies are increasingly looking at promoting entrepreneurship among women, and that there are increasing programs to actually focus in on where women are not welcome to participate, either as leaders or just generally to share their voices, and trying to address some of those barriers. At the value chain level, we see an increase in approaches such as women sales agents, you'll hear more about that later today, and ambassadors, where individual women are lifted up as champions, and then they communicate opportunities and bring back challenges from the field to actually provide that link between a company or an NGO and the women at the field level. We're increasingly seeing committees being set up that are exclusively by and for women to explain some of those challenges that they're facing. We find that organizations are partnering increasingly with community leaders, in fact, even religious leaders in some cases, to understand how they can tailor programs to meet women's needs. So for example, providing childcare or transportation to trainings. And then lastly, we see an increase in organizations focusing on the men in the equation as well, which we know is incredibly important in order to achieve gender inclusive programs and practices. Men also have to be brought along. Next slide, please. Some key takeaways from the how, what our partners told us about how they're partnering and collaborating to have impact. So again, I won't go into much detail here. You can read more on the report itself, but we did find that in many cases, we have MNCs and local companies partnering closely with an NGO or research organization to both implement and evaluate their programs and practices. That research organizations provide tested practices for companies and NGOs to follow. That we do find many trainings on agronomic practices that are becoming increasingly designed for women, and that there is an opportunity for more partnerships in areas like improving women's financial literacy. And we see an interest in many of our partners to implement these kinds of programs. Next slide, please. And in my second to last slide, I'll share that there were two key areas of opportunity where we found that many of the organizations across the GROASIA network have not yet moved into public policy advocacy for women in their value chains. And so this is a huge area of opportunity. And then the second area is actually what we're here to talk about today, but measuring progress and impact as being an incredibly important aspect of understanding whether your programs are working, but also to be able to understand the difference between short-term outputs, like how many women are trained in a program, but also being able to measure long-term impacts, like household income change over time, whether women are able to send their children to achieve greater education, and whether we see increased agency among women who participate in these programs. Next slide, please. I'll share with you a short list of some of the tools that GROASIA has either recommended to our partners or actually used ourselves. Next slide, please. But again, the speakers coming after me will go into much greater detail. And in fact, the speakers that will be coming there will be talking about specifically the list, some of the tools that you see on the list here. So again, we will share these slides with you afterward, and you're welcome to follow the links on this page to learn more about any of these tools. I'll stop here and pass it back to my colleagues to share more detail with you on these different frameworks and programs. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Erin, for that comprehensive presentation, and of course, for sharing with us briefly the result of the report that was published by GROASIA, which for our participants, everyone, you can see the link to the report in the chat box. So thank you so much again, Erin, for that. And let me go to our next speaker. So our next speaker is the newly installed country director of the Mennonite Economic Development Associates, or MEDA. She is an international development professional with over 30 years of NGO work experience as country director, senior country and program manager for projects that focus on women's empowerment, market systems, investment, and microfinance, specifically in post-conflict areas. Catherine has been with MEDA for over 15 years, managing a range of women's economic empowerment projects in Afghanistan, northern Ghana, and Myanmar. Prior to joining MEDA, Catherine worked for the International Rescue Committee in Bosnia, the World Fish Center in Bangladesh, and for CARE International in the Philippines, Eritrea, and Afghanistan. She just finished her assignment in Myanmar, managing MEDA's 5-year, $18 billion Global Affairs Canada-funded Improving Women Opportunities for Women, a project which supported more than 25,000 women farmers and their families in Myanmar to improve their food security. She will share her knowledge and experience on gender equality mainstreaming, or GEM framework. MEDA used this tool in some of their projects worldwide, and for Catherine, she used this for the private sector partners in Myanmar. There is a plan to use GEM in the Philippines and for the upcoming resilience and inclusion through investment in sustainable agriculture project in Davao and Barm regions. MEDA's new country director, Ms. Catherine Sobrevega. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Vijay. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much to PPSA for organizing the event and for inviting me. Thank you also, Erin, for the background on all the tools And I will be sharing about the GEM framework. Specifically, my presentation will showcase the GEM, or Gender Equality Mainstreaming Framework. MEDA has globally adopted gender framework, the GEM framework, which supports companies to become more gender inclusive while promoting better environment practices and business performances with an inclusive, sustainable agri-food market system approach centered around benefiting those living in poverty. So to date, MEDA has provided the GEM technical assistance to 48 companies across 24 countries, resulting in benefits for gender equality, environmental sustainability, business value creation, improved governance, access to new markets, cost savings, innovation, increased worker and supplier productivity, and company reputation. Next slide, please. My agenda will just to introduce a little bit about MEDA. I'm sure as Vijay mentioned, we are just launching our project here in the Philippines. Our Philippines will be our second country project office in Asia. The first one is in Myanmar, and we will be launching our new project here in the Philippines soon. So I will just a brief introduction about who MEDA is, the GEM framework, how do we use it, and there are current applications of GEM, and then our gender lens investing strategy. I will also provide 2 business case on how we were able to do it in Myanmar. So next slide, please. Next slide. So as mentioned, I have been so it's fine, Vijay. Next, please. So MEDA is a Mennonite Economic Development Associates, and our headquarters is in Canada. We have been in existence for nearly 70 years. Next, please. So our mission is to create business solutions to poverty. Unlike other NGOs that they have different programs like health and sanitation, water, MEDA is just focused on economic development. So anything about livelihoods, anything that will create business solution to poverty. So that is our tagline. We work alongside with partners and clients funded by both private and institutional donors. Together, we strive to alleviate poverty by creating sustainable livelihoods for women and men, measured by income, improved processes, increased knowledge, and creating jobs. So the vision is that all people may unleash their God-given potential to earn livelihood, provide for families, and enrich communities. Next slide, please. So our method have been proven over 70 years of experience. We have worked in 72 countries, helping 103 million families, creating jobs for people, improve access to suppliers and customers, resulting in broad impact on entire industries such as agriculture, tourism, and food processing. So just a short background about our project in Myanmar. We have started it in 2015. This is a 5-year Canadian funded project. So the goal is to support more than 25,000 women in 2 ethnic states in Myanmar, the Shan and Kayin, to become active, respective, and empowered economic actors and leaders. Next slide, please. Can you go back again to the yeah, so you can see here in the infographics we have there's a yellow and the blue one. So that's our model. We actually, as I mentioned, in different countries we just use the yellow model, and the blue model is also in other countries where the yellow model is working with local organizations, local NGOs, so that they can reach out to more women, and the blue one is working with private sector so that they can reach to women. In Myanmar, this is the first time that we use these two models in Myanmar. So how do we incorporate this? You can see the purpose is we work with local organizations and we also work with private sector. But the aim of the project is to bring more women in the middle, in the market system. How can they become active participants in the market? The project goal is to bring more women into the market system. And as I mentioned, we have two strategies. The first one in yellow color is by working through our partners, local partners. And they work closely with our project field staff counterparts to facilitate and carry out specific activities like agriculture extension, market linkages, financial services, gender, and environment. This partnership is built on mentorship, training, and capacity building inputs from MEDA, so they can assume future leadership roles in value chain development supported by the project. The second strategy, which is the blue one, is by working through private sector, small and medium enterprises, by providing them incentives through a matching grant to expand their business as input suppliers, service providers, or market actors, and they can reach out to more women. If women will be taught good agronomic practices, they can harvest quality crops, and they can have better income, and they will have money to buy quality inputs. So that's the purpose, making the women reach out, having the women supported by the yellow and the yellow box supported to harvest quality crops, so they can sell and they can buy quality inputs. Private sectors will also see that women are good markets for their products, and as they expand, they can consider women as their buyers or suppliers. Usually you can see private sector, they don't care about whether they are selling to women or men. What they care about is like they make income, they are making sales. But in the project, we're trying to work with private sector so that they can see the benefit of working with women, expanding their value chains, and so that there will be more women who will be buying from them and who will be act as their supplier or their sales agents. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. So what is a GEM? So where did the GEM came from? So it is a practical manual outlining 6-step process for assessing gender performance in implementing gender mainstreaming strategies within business operations. So MEDA, as I mentioned, globally adopted the GEM framework to be used in all of our projects. It supports companies to become more gender inclusive while also promoting better environmental practices and business performance. So we have been using this. Why we have been using this globally? Because we saw that the companies we have provided technical support were able to have this at their advantage. So they were able to benefit from the support. So endorsed by GLI experts, the approach is geography and sector agnostic and this can apply to a wide range of businesses in different environments. So this can be used by small group of businesses or bigger companies. Companies that may necessarily be gender responsive, like a women-led business. Rather, this tool works with any company. Stem from the management brainstorming, the issue of gender, because before, I think especially for those NGOs or those in the private sector that knows about impact investment, there are now investors or even NGOs that choose to work with partners or companies that have a social impact. And before that, they used to have the ESG criteria, the environment, social, and governance criteria. But then we realized that gender is just part of the social criteria. And we just realized that gender should cut across environment, social and governance. So USAID was keen and gave us the funding, and the in-person pilot was done in India, in Indonesia, and then the online testing was made in Vietnam and Tajikistan. So what made the difference at this time? So we offered GEM, MEDA offered GEM as an open source, and it is suitable for small group businesses as well as larger firm, as opposed to any other tools that is quite expensive. Next slide, please. So this is like ESG. So what is ESG? Especially for those who are not yet familiar with it, a set of standards used primarily in investment world to assist risk and companies. So there are questions on environmental that is like climate change, biodiversity, natural resources, carbon emission, air pollution. Then there's also social and governance, and gender is just part of the social, on the social, how it impacts the society and the community. The framework builds upon the environmental, social, and governance investment standard by mainstreaming gender across the ESG criteria. So we're looking at the gender to be in all those criteria. Designed for investors and capacity builders, the aim of the framework is to transform companies to be more gender equitable while supporting business growth and impact. Next slide, please. Our technical assistance to SMEs. So whenever possible, we seek to deliver our technical assistance to our impact investment and blended finance partnerships because we know this supports greater development outcomes. So pro-poor, referencing our work with the low-income populations via supply chain development or the product services for the bottom of the pyramid. Example of this is partnering with MFIs. RTA also supports companies to develop inclusive business models, promote gender equality, and build capacity in ESG and effective business operation, all of which support the company's commercial viability long-term. Across all our technical assistance to 65 companies to date, like in areas like supply chain development, gender equality, mainstreaming, and climate change mitigation or adaptations. We're also very strong in our impact measurement, making sure that whatever they have, whatever the result, they need to look at it and see the impact to their companies. Next slide, please. Another MEDA toolkit for technical assistance. We provide direct capacity building, as I mentioned, either through the local NGOs or to the private sector. We also provide challenge grants, wherein a matching grant that could support the business to scale up and reach out more women. There's also an investment funds that we make sure that is available if the companies will expand, and partnership with service providers. We also realize that not everything can be done by MEDA, so we usually also train business service providers, like right now, like the GEM framework. In Myanmar, we provide training to business development service providers so they can understand the GEM framework and they can do this to other companies who would like to use this one. Next slide, please. So the gender equality mainstreaming framework. So this is the GEM theory of change. So we gendered the ESG framework, inclusion of women across all policies and practices. Inclusive ESG practices promotes women empowerment, and women's empowerment contributes to gender equality. So that's basically the our theory of change. Next slide, please. So GEM is a toolkit that consists of a 6-step process for assessing gender performance and implementing gender mainstreaming strategies within the business operations for growth and impact that in turn contribute to greater gender equality. The GEM framework is meant to be used with 3 different users. So they can be used by investors, capacity builders, and companies. For companies can implement it themselves if they have the capacity, but more likely they would work with capacity builders or business service providers or investors. They use to identify business opportunities and risks in target markets. So human resources, company policies, board governance, supply chain, and environment sustainability. For investors, this is also being used by investors and other stakeholders who play an active role in identifying, managing, or otherwise supporting investing company. The manual is specifically designed for implementation by capacity builders in partnership with investors, unless of course investors may have the internal capacity to implement the framework themselves. So this can be used by the company, can be used by the investor. And the last one is the capacity builders, or example of this capacity building include technical assistance providers. They can also be consultants, incubators, accelerators, business development service providers, and even NGO. Capacity builders are an essential user of GEM because they frequently used with investors to advise. So the NGO usually advise the investors about the investment strategies, and capacity builders also because they provide capacity building to the companies. So you can see here it's a six set of tool. So from identification, who are the companies that will be using it, the rapid assessment, full assessment, strategy development, technical assistance, and impact measurement. So actually it's kind of like a whole cycle wherein you have to have specific questions and all of them. And then the impact measurement is what happened, like what happened after 3 months, what happened after 6 months. Next, please. So tips on using GEM with business. The important is really the messaging. You really need the SME or the company should know the importance of this. It's not just about like auditing them, but there's a purpose why it is being used, right? Like the investors are already looking at this. They will have a better chance of getting investment money or capital. Insert data collected beforehand. Request quantitative data before the in-person assessment. So what happened here is once you have once you have already worked with the company, there are usually like some data that you need to get beforehand. So you don't need to go there and then with a blank paper, but you have to go there and already request for some from some data. Ask business strategy questions first and always keep the business priorities in mind, because we will be working with companies. Their main priority is really their business, right? That is their priority. So make sure that this is also as a GEM framework, as a GEM framework. When you're doing the GEM framework, you should have that in mind, the business of the company. Meet the company where they are at. Understand that MSEs are along a spectrum of gender equality. Don't ask all the questions, only the ones that are relevant to the SME. So there are a lot of questions. When you look at it in the template, there are a lot of questions, but because you already know the companies and you already know what are the data that they have provided, just ask questions that you think are relevant. SMEs should be expected to answer questions if they don't have the data. So if they don't have data, you really don't need to force them to answer this question. Analyze gender-based and financial data that you are collecting to generate insights for SME supply chain initiatives. So all of this analysis should be based on what you have gathered. Next, please. So this is what you will see when you open the gender assessment tool. So are the questions that you will need when you do the scoping assessment and the full assessment and self-assessment. Self-assessment is the question that you want to send to the company before the scoping mission comes. And then what we do is like when they have to work on this one, and then before you do the scoping mission. And then when you do the scoping assessment, you also have to create your team. You have to have like a gender team. You have to have like the one on the market linkages, financial services, and probably someone from gender and environment. It will be good to become holistic. And then after that, you do the full assessment, wherein you do questions and you have like focus group discussions, whether you're doing it where governance, where their market value chain, where their suppliers, with their market, things like that. Next, please. So what is the example of GE mainstreaming as against to ESG? So when environment, example of this is environment policies and practices that benefit staff. So it's kind of like whole, but in adapted GEM framework, in the adapted GEM framework, the policies that benefit female and male staff. So women will really have a different environmental needs. So it will be good to get this during the questions. No, unlike the ESG, it's kind of like a broader, but in the GEM framework, like we are like focusing on the women. What are the benefits what are the environmental policy that benefits our female staff? For the social training, for the social, internal training, recruitment, promotion practices for SME employees. For the GEM, internal training, recruitment, and promotion geared towards men as well to women. Women may be currently overlooked and underrepresented, particularly in recruitment and senior level promotions. We're looking at this in terms of how they hire, how it is being communicated, the recruitment, and how they interview. So it's kind of like a broader one. So governance, qualified functional boards, and gender balance. So we saw one company, they only have one woman the board against 4 men. So we usually tell them that it will be good if they're kind of like balanced 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 2 women. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next one. Next slide. So this is one, like I was mentioning, this is one case that we work into. So we have a private sector partnership in Myanmar. So we have an innovation fund that deploy matching capital to private sector. So there's like lead firm, MSME, and the rice miller. Next one, please. So one of our lead firm, we asked them, so we have 9 lead firms, but then for the GEM framework, we asked 2 of our lead firms to be under the GEM framework. So what happened is we conducted this GEM assessment, and we were able to work with them in terms of like getting interview with their board, with their staff, with their suppliers, with their buyers, everything. And what we have, the result of those were put into report, and we were able to have a meeting with the company and told them about this. And then we plan on how do we address this. There are recommendations that can be done by the company themselves, and they will say, we will do this, we will do this. But there are recommendations, like for example, like they need to change some of the policy, or they need to review some of the policy, or they need to change their criteria for selecting suppliers and everything. So there are those that may need support, from MEDA or from other service providers. So that's where we come in. So which of this that we can provide, and then we incentivize the company. We provide them a grant so that those recommendations can be done. It will be good for us to see what happened when we found it out. So what can we do? What are the things that can be done? And then we were able to work with the company and the business service providers to do all these recommendations, and we were able to see the whole process. And now they are in the process of looking into what made the difference, in terms of like when they were able to change their criteria in terms of selecting suppliers, making equal representation in the board, and then making sure that the HR policies are changed to make it more gender inclusive, things like that. So I think that's all for MEDA. I was able to provide you like a quick, if those interested in terms of like the GEM framework, you can actually have this. It's an open source. You can get it from the internet, and you can always reach out to me if you need more information about this, how we do it. And probably once MEDA will open this up in the Philippines, like we'll be having training on GEM framework, and we will be able to open this with other companies interested. I will be reaching out also for you. So thank you, PPSA, for the time.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Catherine, for that presentation. First, we were introduced about MEDA. Of course, not MEDA, which I pronounced earlier, and I will remember that from now on. And of course, for sharing us about the GEM framework to ensure inclusivity and sustainability in all aspects. So, all right, I think I'll just skip these slides. Sorry. Okay. So for our participants, you know the drill. You may put your questions in the chat box, or questions or comments or insights, and then we will let our speakers answer them during the Q&A part of this session. So let's see. All right, for our third speaker will be presenting another benchmark or tool that that you can use, or companies or organizations can use in ensuring a gender inclusive program or initiative. So our third speaker is the founder of the Institute for Social Entrepreneurship in Asia, or ISEA, and is a pioneer in social entrepreneurship education and research in the region. She is a coach and mentor of social entrepreneurship practitioners and resource institutions, and a bridging leader promoting dialogue and collaboration between the social enterprise sector with government, business, civil society, and academia to achieve greater impact. Through ISEA and its partners, she has led the building of platforms and the promotion of an ecosystem for social entrepreneurship to become a major pathway to address poverty, inequality, and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. She is also a professor in notable academic institutions such as the Asian Institute of Management and the Ateneo de Manila University, and has authored numerous publications on social entrepreneurship. With more than 25 years of experience, she is now the president of the Institute of ISEA. With that, Dr. Marie Lisa Dacanay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vijay, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to be part of this panel. And I think with Erin's presentation, I was thinking of skipping some of my slides, but maybe I will just go through them quickly. But I was asked to present the benchmarks for transformational partnerships for women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains as monitoring and evaluation framework for gender inclusive programs. No? Next slide, please, Vijay. So the benchmarks are actually a result of a research on best practices among social enterprises and inclusive businesses in 4 countries in ASEAN: Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. And they synthesized the factors for success in transforming the lives of women and men small-scale producers in agricultural value chains. No? So they can be looked at as a set of aspirational standards that raise the bar on how enterprises and other AVC or agricultural value chain stakeholders could sustainably transform the lives of women and men small-scale producers, their households, and their communities. But they can also be seen as a pathway to sustainability, as they are meant to provide guideposts on how agricultural value chain stakeholders, including enterprises, can actually aspire to make a meaningful contribution to the SDGs. No? So next slide, please. My next 3 slides will basically be about insights from the benchmarking research that actually Erin already talked about, but I wanted to just reiterate them. No? So the first set of insights have to do with why enterprises and how enterprises directly engage small producers. And we found that directly engaging small producers as suppliers is important rather than just, buying supply from traders. In addressing traceability and quality issues required by certain markets, especially those, of course, that are linked to sustainable consumption and production systems. They're also important in terms of accessing resources, because many times resources from bilateral and multilateral donors, for example, are available if companies actually engage the small producers directly. And of course, in substantiating the desire of a business to be projected as a responsible business. No? But on the other hand, small producers, we've found, are able to provide the needed quality, quantity, and delivery requirements of the market when they are effectively and able to do so with not only adequate inputs, but also appropriate technology, and more importantly, community-based innovations that make possible these things to happen. And then a third insight for this set is the best supplier communities are actually those that are organized into self-governing producer organizations that have achieved high levels of empowerment. Next slide, please. The next set of insights have to do with why and how enterprises should engage women small producers. No? So women small producers are already playing various roles in agriculture and agricultural value chains, but they are usually not recognized or they're invisible, meaning to say they're seen as appendages, for example, to their husbands. Yeah, they're unpaid or underpaid, and when engaged, their participation is limited or constrained by organizational, sociocultural, and other barriers. And one example, of course, is their responsibility for unpaid care work. No? And when they're engaged and these kinds of barriers are not addressed, like the responsibility for unpaid care work, the engaging them become well intentioned, but they have unintended negative impacts, for example, of overburdening women rather than really helping them to get empowered. Of course, there's also the aspect of non-engagement, which results to loss of opportunities and opportunity costs. No? Because, of course, women who are already in the value chains, when they're engaged in a more effective way, can actually lead to greater productivity and results. Next slide, please. The last set of insights that I'd like to share with you before I go to the benchmarks have to do with the role and transformation of responsible businesses. No? So we found that responsible businesses have an important role to play in agricultural value chains as markets, as social investors, and also as partners of small producers. However, small producers, cooperatives, social enterprises, and non-government organizations have an important role as corporate or SME partner enablers of women and men small-scale producers, so that companies including SMEs are usually more effective in reaching the small producers, whether men and women small producers, if they are able to do so with small producers, cooperatives, social enterprises, or partner non-government organizations. Lastly, we've found that responsible businesses that succeed in transforming themselves and their producer communities have and can do so in partnership with enabling institutions and programs. Usually, the transformation process necessitates many competencies that are not present in the companies. And that's the reason why enabling programs actually and enabling institutions are very important in this process. Next slide, please. So may I now go to the benchmarks for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains? No? As I said, this is a synthesis of the factors for success for making a significant impact on women and men small-scale producers. No? And we've found that there are 8 elements. The first has to do with ensuring appropriate technology and the use of community-based or oriented innovation so that we are able to ensure the inclusion of women and men. Sometimes the inclusion of women is hampered by unfriendly technologies to women. Second, that the best practices actually showed that the agricultural value chain interventions assisted women and men small-scale producers to actually get a more substantive share of the value created in the chain over time. No? And this is done usually because they're assisted not only to become consolidators of their produce, but also they're able to move up the value chain in terms of semi-processing, processing, and the like. The third benchmark has to do with food security and resilience, that no matter the agricultural value chain, whether it is even for those that are not in food, no, that there are actually investments to make sure that the agricultural producers, the women and men agricultural producers, are actually food secure and develop their resilience. And the fourth is actually about ensuring the empowerment of small producers, and a big part of this has to do with developing or investing in self-governing institutions of the women and men small-scale producers. The fifth is about investments in ensuring that the women and men small-scale producers become stewards of the environment and sustainable consumption and production systems. The sixth has to do with a combination of transactional and transformational services. Transactional services are those that are provided in order for the small scale producers to become better suppliers, right? What the markets need in terms of quality, quantity, and price, yeah. But transformational services are those services that assist the small producers to become actors in their own development. For example, the development of cooperatives and the leadership development that happens in these cooperatives, no? So we've found that this combination of services are actually important. The seventh has to do with women's participation and empowerment. That actually, even as we talk about the first six, no, the first six elements, that actually women's participation and empowerment is something that is cross-cutting across all this, and it's not just limited to one benchmark. And then the eighth has to do with measurable outcomes of transformation. That that there is a process by which inputs, inputs and outputs actually, and in combination with processes, result to measurable outcomes of transformation for the women and men small scale producers, their communities, and their economic subsectors. Next slide, please. So when we actually, we did the research in 2015 and finished it sometime in 2017. And what we tried to do was to say, okay, if we now have this set of benchmarks, how do we then assist agricultural value chain stakeholders to become practitioners of the benchmarks, right? And to assist them to actually become more transformational partners and enablers of women. And we actually transformed the benchmarks into a set of scorecards. No? So we have a scorecard where we actually have the 8 elements translated into 100 points, no? Where agricultural value chain program holders can use this as an evaluation, planning, and monitoring tool to look at to what extent they're adhering to the benchmarks. And based on that, they're able to also be assisted to define areas where they need intervention and improvement. So we also developed a set of scorecards for SMEs and social enterprises. And we transformed the 8 benchmarks into 4 scorecard elements. No? So these scorecard elements are commitment to make strategic investments in developing small producers as partner suppliers, no? Which has 20 points. A commitment to develop strategic partnerships with cooperatives, associations, and other self-governing organizations of small producers and their enablers, which is actually also 20 points. And then a commitment to develop and sustain initiatives that promote women's economic empowerment in the supply chain and communities impacted by the enterprise, which is actually getting 40 points. And the fourth has to do with accounting for, linking, and communicating its success as a responsible business to measurable outcomes of transformation among its partner women and men small producers, their organizations, and communities. And this is for 20 points. We also tried to look at how it would be different for corporations. So we also came up with a set of, with a scorecard for corporations. No? Next slide, please. So it's slightly different. It's actually also 4, but it's slightly different, especially in relation to, for example, the first one is about alignment of philanthropic and social investments towards developing small producer communities to participate in the company supply chain. No? Because small SMEs and social enterprises that are usually small and medium enterprises, actually they are less developed. They have less developed systems in terms of relative to their corporate counterparts. No? So we've actually adjusted elements of the scorecard so that we're able to appreciate, no, the differing contexts that corporates as well as SMEs and social enterprises are in, but still coming up with 4 elements in terms of alignment of philanthropic and social investments towards developing small producer communities, strategic partnerships also, and then engagement in value chain practices that enhance women's participation and empowerment, and the measurement of outcomes as well. But as I said, what is inside the scorecard is actually more appreciative of the differing context of corporate agribusiness. Next slide, please. So we also came up with a set I just wanted to share with you a sample scoring guideline, no, for one of the 10 key result areas under element 3, for example, when we talk about women's economic empowerment and the supply chain. No, how does the scorecard look like? For example, for 3.2, no, the company has a formal gender equality or diversity and inclusion policy that ensures fair and non-discriminatory principles such as equal pay for equal work, equal opportunities for women to avail of services and programs, and providing, promoting, and promoting women-friendly spaces and culture in the workplace. So it's a score of 0 if you have no policy or practice promoting this. You have a score of 1 when you have a policy or practice in promoting at least 2 of the 3 gender equality principles. But you actually get a score of 2 if you have policy or practice in promoting at least 2 of the 3. No? And then you have a score of 3 if you actually practice this not only in the enterprise, but actually at the value chain level. And then you have a score of 4 when you have a comprehensive policy and practice and regular mechanisms to plan, implement, monitor, and evaluate, as well as undertake continuous improvement in terms of policy and practice. No, so there's a scale of 0 to 4 that you're able to score yourself, but we're able to provide a venue actually where we assist the company to evaluate themselves objectively. So next slide, please. And we also came up with a score interpretation system where we actually assist in the interpretation of the score, where when you have a score of 15 to 30 for SMEs and social enterprises, or 31 to 46 or 47 to 60, you're either a we aware enabler, or you are we responsive, or you're we transformative. No? And there's also a scoring, there's also a score interpretation process for companies that's slightly different given the relationship between the scoring system and the being we aware, we responsive, and being we transformative. And then lastly, I just like to share with you the next slide, please. What we are trying to do in terms of promoting these benchmarks and scorecards. We're actually doing a piloting of the benchmarks with corporations, small and medium enterprises, and social enterprises. And actually, PPSA is one of the partners that we are looking at for us to actually have some partnerships with private corporations to be part of the piloting process for the use of the tool. And the tool is actually for evaluation, planning, and learning. Yeah. And the capacity building and action consulting process includes an evaluation of the COVID-19 impact on small producers in the supply chain of the corporation or the enterprise, in terms of ensuring that it becomes an input to the corporation's inclusive recovery plan. It also includes a baseline study on the practice of the benchmarks for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains from the perspective of the small producers. And these are actually inputs that are brought into a 2-day orientation and planning workshop with the company stakeholders, where we do an orientation and we use the scorecard. And in that 2-day orientation and planning workshop, we also help to develop a women's economic empowerment plan. And then there is some assistance in terms of implementation of the women's economic empowerment plan. We're also, to enable the practice of the benchmarks, we're also in partnership with, we're also doing partnerships with government, like we're engaging the ASEAN and country level country level departments like the Department of Agriculture, for example, in the Philippines, to enshrine a set of guidelines for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains so that program holders as well as enterprises can be supported, can be incentivized, to practice the benchmarks. So that's all. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Doc Lisa, for that presentation and for introducing us with the benchmarks for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains. All right. Thank you so much again to our speakers, Erin and Catherine. Now we are going to the Q&A part of this session. Um, I will let Cherry of PPSA to facilitate the question and answer. Over to you, Cherry.
Thank you, Vijay. Thanks to our speakers for sharing such frameworks that are surely going to be very useful in one way or another for our participants in this afternoon session. So given that, the screen or the floor is now open for any thoughts, comments, questions, or related practices of the participants of the session after hearing the presentation of the frameworks. Anybody? You can use the raise hand button po in your Zoom account if you have questions. Okay. So while others are thinking of their questions, we have noted some questions in the chat box a while ago. I think, may we call on Amil Sanday? I think he or she has a question on the GEM framework presented by Ms. Catherine Sobrevega. Amil? Okay, let me read na lang po the question. Hi ma'am, was wondering how the current political situation in Myanmar has affected the project. Because Ms. Catherine shared a while ago about the GEM framework implementation in Myanmar. Ms. Catherine?
In terms of, as I mentioned, we started the project 2015. So we're about to be finishing up this year. So what happened is because we're building up our women leaders, sales agents and everything, I think we are already on the project wherein the women are already doing them by themselves. So our staff no longer travel to the field. So we can just monitor them in terms of like the phone, what are they doing and everything. I think with the current situation, we were able to put our project like ready, like the women are ready to do it by themselves without considering also the safety of the staff. I think we kind of like I think that the only one that we kind of like problem is on the businesses, because some of the businesses have a hard time going to the villages buying their produce, because there's kind of like logistics problem, transportation, and the banking. I think that's kind of like a problem now. Like every time you get the money in the bank, you need to go process. So I think that's one of the things that that are the problem when it comes to our private sector partners. But in terms of like the GEM framework, we were able to do this as well. Like probably even like probably before the COVID came or before the military coup came. So we were able to provide the results, the recommendations, and then the company is the one doing it or moving it forward. Like how do they address all those? And if they wanted to reach out to impact investors, how can they move with the process with the kind of recommendations that we have seen during the GEM assessment.
Thank you, Ms. Catherine. May correction lang po. That question came from Avery Silk Arevalo. The question from Amil Sanday is also for Ms. Catherine Sobrevega. This is the GEM framework can be used as a tool in measuring GOD or gender and development for farmers, men and women, especially in the field of the rice industry.
I think it depends on who would give this. Like if like I mentioned, this is usually for companies, like, or probably this can also be used by cooperative or a small group of business. And the purpose is for them to to improve their processes, they improve what they're doing so that they can use this for the next for the next for the next level, right? So from getting money for getting funds or grants from the NGO, they wanted now to access impact investment investors, no? So this is basically it. So if you think this will serve the purpose, yes, why not? And you can go over the questions. There are there, like they were talking about the governance, the process, the investment. So there are questions that could help, but probably not the entirety because you're talking here about your supplier, your value chain actors.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification, Ms. Kathleen. Yes, from the presentation, we understand that the GEM framework is, it seems it's designed for company for for gender mainstream approaches, especially in accessing investment opportunities. While we also observed that from the presentation of Doc Lisa, the benchmarks seems to be more applicable to the question. Is that correct po, Doc Lisa?
It's true.
The question is about is the GEM framework can be used as a tool in measuring gender and development, especially in the field of rice industry for farmers, men and women. Doc Lisa, you're on mute po.
I think the difference between the GEM framework, if I may, not my little understanding based on the presentation and the benchmark, is that the GEM framework came from engaging companies, I think, using the ESG framework, yeah? But the perspective of the benchmarks came from an understanding of the success for engaging women and men small scale producers so that transformation really happens, right?
Yes.
So I think so it's slightly different, but there's some meeting point somewhere, I think. But the perspective, I think, of the benchmarks have more to do with are stronger in relation to the perspective of the women and men small scale producers, what they need in order for them to actually be impacted in a significant way by enterprises and agricultural value chain stakeholders. Yeah. And maybe there's also another question. May I answer another question directed to me
Yes,
by,
please, Doc
yeah?
Lisa.
There's a question, I think, about the support of government after the Women's Economic Empowerment Plan is actually implemented or is being implemented by the company or the enterprise. The reason why we actually developed a set of guidelines for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains is that this is a set of guidelines for governments to adopt in order for them to enable the practice of the benchmarks, right? So we're now trying to we have a memorandum of agreement, for example, now with the Department of Agriculture, where we are trying to look at how we can incorporate the benchmarks in their programs, right? Of course, it's at a very early stage, but I think the idea is for government to be an enabler in the practice of the benchmark. So that's, I think, the relationship between the guidelines, no, that we are trying to make government adopt, and the guideline, the benchmarks, which are actually for practitioners, no, in agricultural value chains. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Doc Lisa. I think there's another question po from Miss Jean Ilio. Miss Jean Ilio, would you like to share your question po, or I can just read from the chat box?
You can just
Okay, I
read,
will.
actually. Just read it, Cherry. Hi, Lisa.
Hello. Hello,
Thank you,
Jean.
Miss
I
Jean.
answered actually what you said about the interestingness. I mean, the framework being interesting, but I didn't see a question.
I just post it, actually. No. Okay, let me read it. Uh, so I was wondering whether you can, the, the interesting thing about your scorecard
Mm-hmm.
is that it can be used to further incentivize
Yes.
SMEs, ISEs, and corporations.
Yes.
So they say, oh, okay, guys, if you hit the transformative score, then you get awarded.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
di
one
ba?
way of that's one way
Yeah,
that we can do it. Yeah.
yes, yes. I mean, this is of course after you're piloted. So it's just
Yeah.
like, so what? So what? Where do you bring the scores? So it's just
Yeah. So I think
seal of we responsive.
yes, actually, now that we're in the piloting stage, we're starting to address that issue, Jean, because I think it doesn't make much sense, no, for you to just assist companies, no, to
Mm.
actually do the improvement from being we aware to becoming we responsive to becoming we transformative, unless the company is actually committed to that already, right? But
Mm.
that's the very reason why we think we need incentives from government in order for us to actually promote women's economic empowerment among companies who may not be as committed but are willing with some incentives, right?
Mm.
So in that sense, I think the awards program that you were talking about is one way, because of course companies are wanting to get seals of good
Yeah,
governance,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And seals of being we enablers, right? And
Yes, yes.
so we're thinking about that, but we would be happy to engage you to think about this some more.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay, dear. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that response po. I think this question we can accommodate this one last question and can be addressed to all the speakers who may want to share their respective answers. One question from the participant is that as women move forward in entrepreneurial development, how do they and you deal with the husband or partners who judge their business success as competing with family needs, actively undermine the women's business aims, and sometimes cause the women entrepreneurs to limit their initiatives to maintain household peace? This is related to what Sharon has shared on the barriers being experienced by women, cultural norms, which is still existent unfortunately, even in the Philippines. So this question is addressed to all the speakers. Anybody who would want to comment or manifest answers to that. Thank you.
So maybe I can speak in relation to women and men small scale producers, no, and the empowerment process that we've seen happen in communities where it has succeeded, right? The reason why the benchmarks are not about women's economic empowerment only, but about transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains is because we do recognize that the women and men actually coexist in agricultural value chains. No, it's just that the women are invisible, underpaid, and all that, right? So what we have seen to be most successful is that when mixed groups of women and men are actually engaged, that they both are engaged in a way where gender and development and gender sensitivity programs happen from the beginning, right? If they are mixed groups. And that has actually, if you want to see a best practice in that, I saw a best practice in relation to that with Alter Trade Foundation Incorporated in Negros, where they actually introduced a gender program from the beginning, engaging women and men small scale producers. And the outcome, especially under the pandemic, when we actually looked at what happened during the pandemic, the men were actually helping the women in the household work. So that the women, the what was being experienced in other communities, no, where the women were being overly burdened because of COVID did not happen in alter trade communities, no, because they already went through a process of gender and development programs over a period of 20 years, of course, right? So what I'm just trying to point out is when you are actually engaging women and men at the same time in the value chain, it is important that you introduce gender and development perspectives from the beginning. Yeah. But when you engage women as in women only organizations, of course, that can be an enhancing process, right? At the beginning, we've seen that there are some rural improvement clubs, for example, that were engaged, no, that didn't really have a gender perspective, but after being engaged to participate no? There became a necessity for gender and development perspectives to be incorporated, and that enhanced actually the process of development of these women. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc Lisa, for explaining the concept a bit about gender and development, that women and development and women and development is not enough in the process of pursuing gender inclusive practices po. For the participants who may still have questions, feel free to put your questions in the chat box and I invite the speakers to answer them directly. In the interest of time, we are inclined to move to the next part of the webinar, which is the breakout session. We will be hearing experiences from 3 organizations we have invited to illustrate how they practice gender inclusive practices in their own works. So I will be giving the screen back to VJ to facilitate. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Cherry, and of course to our speakers for responding to the questions posed by our participants. Now, for the next part of this session, you will be assigned to the breakout session randomly, and then the main goal of the breakout group is to present actual examples of gender inclusive projects implemented by our guest company representatives. And of course, you can ask your questions and share your experiences and the opportunities presented by the gender projects. And of course, just to introduce our speakers, breakout session speakers. For breakout 1, we have our speaker is Miss Christine Jodloman. She started on a mission to bring back the sense of excitement and wonder in the Philippine agriculture through meaningful narratives and a movement. Having raised in a rural farming community, she observed the lack of young farmers and lack of motivation of older farmers to grow food. She is a young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative Academic Fellow and also the first Filipino recipient of the Young Global Changers Scholarship in Berlin, Germany in 2017, and the Mindanao Youth Champion by the 2030 Project, a food security advocate. Ms. Christine Jodloman is the current Associate Director of AGREA Foundation. And then for our breakout session 2, our resource person is the founder and CEO of Morination Agricultural Products, a social enterprise established in 2014. Morination is a member of the UN Business Group, the UN Global Compact Network, and Grow Asia's PPSA. For the local Philippine network of the UNGC, she is a convener for the business expert group on people and the agri value chain. And then for our breakout session 3, our speaker is Dr. Mary Ann P. Sayoc, who currently sits as the public affairs lead of East West Seed and the private sector co-chair of PPSA. Now we will be opening the room or the breakout session in this view, okay? So you just click to join the breakout session. All right, the breakout session will remain in the plenary, and then as mentioned, our speaker is Ms. Christine Jodloman, as introduced a while ago. I'll be sharing the screen. Wait. Okay, so for just to reiterate the flow of this breakout session, we will be having the presentation, and then for our participants, you may ask any questions or share your experience or comment your insights or perspectives on the presentation or your own experience. So with this, I'm now giving the floor or the mic to Miss Christine. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much once again, PPSA, to Ms. Amy Chua for inviting AGREA here today to share about our experiences on women inclusive food systems transformation. So I will present here today on behalf of AGREA, the power of intentional inclusion of women for food systems transformation. Next slide, please. Just to share about AGREA and the background of AGREA. So AGREA is an innovative and inclusive for-purpose organization. We have two entities, the AGREA Business and the other one is the AGREA Foundation. So our main goal is really the cultivation of human beings and bringing the ecology of dignity, especially dignifying the food producers, our farmers and fisher folks. So we have three principles: ecology of dignity, agri-based economy, no, because the Philippines is an archipelago. We have a lot of islands, 7,000 of them, but none of these islands is sustainable in terms of food. So we want to create a model island, no, na food is sustainable and hindi na kailangan mag-import. So we piloted this one island economy on the island province of Marinduque. And our next principle is fair trade. Next slide, please. I would also like to share our statement of support to the United Nations Women Economic Principles, or the WEPs, shared by our founding farmer and CEO, Ms. Cherry Atalano. Investment for women is an investment for the whole community, and women has this nurturing attitude that is needed for the agriculture sector. It demands a lot of nurturing spirit to change the narrative and turn it into a sector that will make the country progressive. So as in AGREA, no, we lead by example on this. Currently, 63% of the AGREA workforce are women, and we plan to make this 80% now by the year 2025. Next slide, please. And to really have this deep intentionality, you know, to have or to really include women in our programs, to embed women inclusion in our programs, we have established or created our banner program under AGREA Foundation that is really focused on women. It's called Forward, or Finding Opportunities and Roles of Women in Agriculture and Rural Development. As you can see, we really highlight women now as the center and core of moving and really developing agriculture forward. So we have three areas under our banner program na Forward. First is yung sustainable livelihood. Second is movement. This is more of campaigns and events. And the third one is policy, as we are pushing for a Magna Carta of Women in Agriculture, hopefully for this year. Next slide, please. Just a background of women in agriculture in the Philippines. So agriculture in the Philippines has been male-dominated since then. So as you can see on this one, 77% of the current workforce in agriculture are men, and 23% are women. However, women really play important roles, which include yung mga seed production, planting, and more on the marketing of products sa food value chain. Next slide, please. One of the first women-led initiatives we have is this More Love for Women Farmer. This was conducted last 2019 in Siargao Island. So we have been invited as a consultant by the province of Siargao to lead in their food security movement. Because they have been having this problem of napakamahal ng food and hindi na-afford ng mga locals yung food. And the next one is 90% ng food nila ay imported from other nearby provinces as far as Davao, Bukidnon, Surigao City. So this Love for Women Farmers was initiated because we interviewed a lot of farmers and fisher folks sa island, and karamihan sa kanila nag-resort to tourism-related activities because back in 2017, when Boracay closed, kasi lilinisin siya, Siargao experienced a tourism boom or shock. So yung mga tourists na dapat sa Boracay, pumunta sila sa Siargao to experience the beach, to experience the views, and hindi handa yung island to have that much tourist. Kaya nag-resort sila sa pag-import ng mga food, And kahit yung mga locals mismo, hindi nila afford yung food. Halimbawa, yung isang farmer na na-interview na, fisher na na-interview namin, yung tuna sa kanila dati, it's very normal food. But now, because of the tourism shock or tourism boom in Siargao, it's been a luxury na no, yung tuna na fish kasi kahit sila hindi na nila ma-afford. And mostly yung mga male farmers, naging surfing instructors, naging habal-habal drivers because, for example, yung isang coconut farmer doon, he earns around 30 pesos per kilo ng coconut no, every 45 days. But in one day, because of tourism, he can earn as much as 1,500 by driving habal-habal. So doon talaga sila magre-resort sa mas malaki yung kita and income. And naiwan yung mga asawa nila, yung mga women farmers doon sa kanilang bahay. And kaya namin we initiated this to reinvigorate local agriculture in Siargao and to really empower women farmers to really lead the food security of the island kasi yung mga asawa nila, they already have high-paying jobs no, sa tourism industry. Next slide, please. So the event catered, no, yung aim namin or goal for the event is to reach around 500 women farmers. However, 800 women farmers came no from different municipalities kasi Siargao has 9 municipalities. And just to share no yung tourism boom sa Siargao, only 3 municipalities of the island are experiencing it, particularly yung mga maraming tourists, yung General Luna, and the other 6 they feel poorer yung mga tao doon kasi nagmamahal na yung food, and kaya it's really needed na yung women farmers to step up and to really lead the agriculture of the island. Next slide, please. And isa rin tong farm school namin no, so one of the best practices when it comes to women inclusion. We opened our farm school last 2017, and according to Ms. Cherry, no, 3% ng farm school scholars namin, kahit free scholarship na siya, are women and youth. With the deep intentionality ni Ms. Cherry no, sa leadership niya to really include women and youth sa agriculture and to have more women and young enrollees sa farm school namin, it increased by 62.98% or almost 63% 2019 and 2020 last year, yung lockdown. So you can really see how the leadership focus, no, and if you are really intentional towards really including women, it can really change the course of things like this one. So next slide, please. And this is under sustainable livelihood. So a lot of our partner farmers and yung mga partners namin ay women. This is to really unlock the investment na sa farmers, especially we support women MSMEs in food processing and supply chain. Next slide, please. So during the lockdown last year, we have initiated this movement called Move Food Initiative. So this is still under the Sustainable Livelihood Program. So this started when around March 16, 3 days after the lockdown, March 18. A pineapple farmer called our CEO, no, Ms. Cherry, na meron siyang 15,000 na pinya and wala siyang market for these pineapples no kasi nagsarado yung mga market na pinagbabagsakan niya, and he has parang nagtiwala lang siya by through messaging Ms. Cherry no, or calling Ms. Cherry na we can help to move his pineapples to the market. And that one pineapple farmer became a movement of 28,000 more farmers now that we help. So these are composed mostly of cooperatives, associations, and agrarian reform beneficiaries. And karamihan sa mga partner farmers or partner cooperatives namin nito, yung mga leaders o yung mga main contacts namin, yung nagpa-facilitate talaga ng delivery of fresh produce, no? 190,000 fresh produce dito sa Metro Manila ay mga women. So sa mga association nila, sila yung leader ng association nila. And as far as Mindanao, mostly women leaders yung mga kausap namin, and very smooth ng transactions pag women entrepreneurs yung kausap namin. So that's why we have achieved this through the help of women farmer associations that we have partnered with Move Food Initiative. Next slide, please. So during actually the lockdown last year, we have provided around 1,000 grow-at-home kits to mostly mga women pa rin, mga women sa relocation sites or yung mga urban and peri-urban areas. So this includes Payatas, Cavite, Laguna, and Bulacan. So itong grow-at-home kits, kasi nung nag-lockdown last year, mostly nag-resort into growing their own food at home. So we provide this grow-at-home kits. It's a complete set of kit na meron siyang seeds, seedlings, meron siyang manual. But before we give this to them, we conduct special training also. Meron na siyang seed tray, meron na siyang compost so that they can really grow their own food at home. And nakakatuwa kasi most ng mga beneficiaries namin, mga partner beneficiaries namin is sinishare nila to sa social media namin, sinasend sa Facebook or sa Messenger, yung mga harvest nila last year. And we have given this around August to September last year. 3 months after that, nung December, kasi maraming bagyo, nagpapasalamat sila kasi nagmahalan yung mga gulay sa palengke, pero sila, they can harvest their own food. So it's really important na when you empower women, these women also empower yung whole community niya. First sa home by providing healthy meals sa kanyang family. So sinishare nila, nagluluto sila ng pinakbet, yung munggo nilalagyan nila ng mga harvest nila from the So around 1,000 of these grow at home kits, most na mga beneficiaries, mga 60% are also women. Next slide, please. So this is still under our plant memorandum of agreement with the Department of Agriculture, And this po naman is sa Marinduque. We have created this community food garden contest sa mga gustong sumali, And they will have a prize. We will provide all the seeds, the seedlings, and the materials. And after 52 days, pagandahan sila ng mga gardens nila, palakihan sila ng mga kalabasa or repolyo, petchay. And mostly yung mga winners po ay women. Next slide, please. Yan, this po. Kung makikita niyo po, they are really, from the previous slide, yes po. They are really empowered to grow their own food and they harvest. Makikita mo talaga yung food to table chain dito po na part. So next slide, please. And currently po, for this year, we are currently in partnership with Bayer, Rise Against Hunger, to train 80 women sa Payatas po. Kasi mostly sa kanila, nawalan po ng trabaho during lockdown. And their main source of livelihood is yung pangangalakal and pagbabasura. But here sa po namin, it's still under forward po. We will train them for 5 weeks to grow their own food, provide healthy meals for their families. And we also added the dream building component, leadership, financial literacy also, and the basics of budgeting for their homes and how to budget for their mini farms or urban farms. So nakakatawa po because we also created a Facebook group kasi may assignments po sila every week, and nakakatawa po kasi they really do their assignments and nagtatanim talaga sila ng mga cuttings, katulad po ng alugbate, tsaka seeds sa sa mga plastic containers which they recycle. And next slide, please. And this another one is Grow Her po. This is a platform, and AGREA po, through Miss Cherry, was one of the founding committee members to really launch this platform. So last March 30, this was officially launched in the Philippines, led by AGREA. And the launch po was also the first UN Food Systems Dialogue here in the Philippines. So itong grower po, nabuo siya kasi yun, most women farmers are invisible, no? Invisible workers. So we really want to highlight them, to share inspiring stories that can inspire them. So it's also a community-based microsite po na allows women to break through the glass ceiling through learning events, essential resources, and best practice sharing. Next slide, please. And this one naman po is under our policy, still on the forward program. We want to push for a Magna Carta of Women in Agriculture. This started po on the year 2019 and was inspired by the current situation of Siargao Island, the first one I have shared po. So it started as a roundtable po on gender equity and empowerment. And yung first title pa namin, it's really to focus on Magna Carta of Rural Women. But most of the participants, these are 30 leaders, no, from all over the Philippines who are leading women-centered and women-focused associations, may it be in agriculture, agribusiness, and sa policy po, no, may ano po tayo participants then from BARM areas or Bangsamoro region, and also from indigenous peoples leaders po. So, but they have suggested po na to really just focus on the agriculture because it's very important, especially at this time. So next slide po. So we also wanted to share po this video. It's a manifesto video po for women in agriculture.
Can you hear a sound?
Wala po.
Wait, I'll just share my video and video.
Dati, naghihintay lang ako. Ngayon, nasa kamay ko na ang pagbuhay sa aking pamilya. Isa pang salita ang nadagdag sa aking pagkatao. Babae, kapatid, at magsasaka. Babae, anak, at magsasaka. Babae, asawa, at magsasaka. Babae, ina, at magsasaka. Tulad ng aking mga pananim na lumalago, lumalago din ako. Sa aking sikap, sa aking dunong, at sa aking pangarap.
So yun po, yung video po na yun, mostly po mga partner farmers namin sa Marinduque. And it's based on their experience na before pa sa mga trainings na sa farm school, before pa they felt na included sila. Parang lagi lang silang naghihintay sa bahay, no? Para umuwi yung mga asawa nila kasi yung mga asawa nila yung may kita for the day. And yung mga asawa nila yung nagpapakain for the family. But now, with all the trainings and the empowerment, no, they feel included, they feel heard, and they really feel na napapakinggan sila. And they are really empowered to make change, no, and starting that for their family. And to really be included sa food value chain. And these are the last words, our last words po. Most things except agriculture can wait. And it parang last words na rin po, no, it's really important, no, na through our leadership, yung leadership focus natin should be intentional inclusion of women, na hindi lang natin i-include yung mga women sa programs namin because of this, because kailangan, but because it's really important, especially at these times, to have a gender balanced workforce, and inclusion of women can really have this transformative change. And we can really see that, no, based on our experience po sa food and agriculture, food systems transformation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Christine, for that wonderful presentation. Of course, for introducing us with AGREA, and of course the work that you do for our women farmers, especially in the rural areas. So I know it looks, so easy to initiate gender inclusive programs, no? But in reality, there are, challenges such as cost, logistical requirements, and permits. So Christine, my question is, what are the lessons learned of AGREA or personally you in terms of providing or initiating gender inclusive projects for the rural communities?
Yes, po. I have just seen the comment section just now, and I would like to apologize for speaking my native language, no, Tagalog, and I should speak in English po pala. So as for your question, sir, one of the best lessons siguro, no, I have been in AGREA for 2 years, and as a young woman working in agriculture sector, I really feel empowered, no, in designing and implementing programs na it's really embedded yung intentional inclusion of women in agriculture. And one of the things that we are looking forward pa, no, based on the past lessons we learned, is to really have and establish women-focused associations, because especially now, most of our partner farming communities, both their membership and leadership in farmers association are male-dominated, and most of the women feel restricted to share their opinions because the leaders of their association, from president to secretary to auditor, are male or men, and they sometimes feel that they are just proxy. For example, their husbands are on the farm and they will not be able to attend the meeting, and they will be the one to attend the meeting because they are considered as proxy only. But when you have this women-led establishment or federation of farmers, these women will really be empowered to lead, not to vote. And another thing, aside from the women-led federation of farmers, is to really improve the governance of these women-led associations, especially integrating women economic principles, and to really integrate gender and development in their training programs. No, it's not an option, but it should really be integrated. Not just the technical trainings, because in AGREA, our trainings are not just the technical skills. We don't start with the technical skills at first. We start with the soft skills. So we start with dream building, leadership, the financial literacy part, and the gender and developments in our program, so that they can see that this workforce should be gender balanced, and they will respect the participation of both men and women in the food and agriculture value chain. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Christine. Now, I'm giving the mic or the floor to any of our participants here who may want to share their experience or your questions or comments. I see Fei Chu, you have something to add or share on the floor.
No, I just wanted to commend the speaker. She spoke, she inspired me through her stories. I couldn't understand a lot of it, but I got a lot of the stories as well that came through. So thank you for her passion. That was all I was going to say.
All right, thank you so much, Faye. Anyone from our participants? Oh, Miss Rosalou, you can unmute
Hi.
now.
Yes,
Hi.
it was a really inspiring story and to see really a lot of women empowerment. What do you call that? Initiatives happening on the ground. I'm just curious, what are the gender inclusive frameworks that AGREA used in these projects? Thank you.
For the gender inclusive frameworks, we don't have the baseline, but we have internal in our company. No? So first, we start with the governance to really empower the governance part. So really establishing women-led associations of farming cooperatives. The second one is to focus on the sustainable livelihood component. And the third one is to really mentorship and advisory, because mentorship is very important, especially for the agriculture sector. But we have been one of the pilot SMEs to have this GRP tool, or the Gender Responsive Procurement Tool. It's by the UN Women and ADB partnership. So we were one of the pilot companies to use the tool. And just a background of that tool, it has 4 tiers, and they were really they said that our results were pretty unique because we belong to the tier 4. So there are 4 tiers. The 4th tier, it's the producers of raw materials. So in agriculture sector, these are the farmers and the fisher folk. The second tier, the third tier, I mean, is companies who buy the products of the 4th tier. So they add value to the products of the 4th tier. The second tier is more on adding more value to the products of the 3rd tier until it comes to the 1st tier. So it's like the very finished product. And it's very important because the tool was focused on empowering the 1st tier, but it's really important to empower the 4th tier, which is the producers of the raw materials, because it's domino effect. If you don't empower the 4th tier, all of the other tiers will be also affected. They are more on really practicing gender balanced and gender responsive and women inclusive procurement. So it's really important to empower the 4th tier, that they know what is gender and development, so that their practices can have a domino effect to the other tiers. So that's one of the things we recommended for the gender responsive procurement tool. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Christine, and to our participants who have asked their questions and participated for today's learning.
Do you have anything you want to share about maybe insights on the delivery of gender mainstreaming programs in your own work, for things that maybe we should avoid, or assumptions that you made about how you were going to implement the programs that later you found were not correct?
Hello. Yes.
Yes, Miss Sharon, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I think right now we're actively working with Grow Asia and the ASEAN's program on the Responsible Agriculture Investments Program, and we're using that as framework for to fuel the investments in the communities and the rural communities. And so far, these frameworks have been very helpful in us determining which areas we can provide more investments and assistance in. So I think in that regard, the responsible agri investments in Southeast Asia, led by Grow Asia and the ASEAN, it's a very good framework for small companies to engage with local communities. Oh, Whether you're asking about the gender mainstreaming programs.
Oh, more about as you were implementing gender mainstreaming programs and working with women farmers, were there assumptions that you made going in which you later found um, were not correct, or anything in particular that surprised you, if there were assumptions that were later found to be not correct?
Actually, before we go into communities, we already run diagnostics and we vet the communities. So, whatever assumptions we have to test them. So right now, all the programs that we have regarding working with women and development programs for them have been working well for the company.
May I ask a question?
Yes, Dr. Dacanay.
Yeah, I'm a bit, I'm trying to understand your model for gender mainstreaming. Yeah. I understand that you are an intermediary marketing organization, right?
We're a social enterprise.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I understand
Yes.
that your principles and all that is, but you're in terms of your function, how you actually operate and the service that you provide the communities you serve, you're basically providing you
Yes.
are
Yes.
serving as
Intermediate.
an intermediary marketing organization, right?
Yes, that's right.
So in terms of engaging the communities, you're really engaging with communities that already have entrepreneurs that who are women who actually are engaging the communities. Is that right? You're
Yes.
not really organizing the communities.
No.
Okay, so you choose communities where there's already a women-led enterprise, or an
Yes.
organized community that could actually engage you already to provide the
The needed.
the
Yes.
volume that is required, and you're really providing market access, right?
Market access, training, increase trade capacities for the communities. And we also employ fair trade practices so that the prices of their goods would be coming from the farmers themselves.
Yeah. But so you don't have any inputs in relation to leadership development, in terms of gender and development orientation, for example.
Actually, that's already integrated in our programs. Whenever there would be technical requirements set for instance, the United Nations, we already incorporate a program for the communities and including the women, so that they will be able to meet the requirements set by institutional buyers. So that would be included in the program. For instance, we train them on the proper post-harvest production so that they could meet the requirements. We also train them on financial training so that it's really more of agri-entrepreneur training for the growers.
So
And
it's really, so in a sense, I'm just trying to struggle because I think in the framework that we presented earlier, there's actually the set that we call transformational services and
yes,
the set that we call transactional services. No, and usually through partnerships, it's possible to provide both. No, but in your case, you're mainly providing the transactional services. Is that it?
no, it's more of transformational because we just don't buy from the go and then we leave them. It's more of increasing their capacity so that their communities would be able to transform and to be more effective in their in the production of their goods. So it's more of transformation because we could see that the impact that these relationships would bring to the community. So it's not just transaction like, oh, we will just buy this from you, and then after this, we'll forget about our relationship. It's really developing our relationships with them. Actually, we've had this since we started our organization in 2014. These are the same organizations that we've been working with consistently for our programs and for our projects.
Okay. I'm just not, I guess I'm just asking these questions in relation to, providing a gender and development perspective. And I'm not clear on how that is done, given that you don't have organizational development support.
But for us, kasi it's really more of our preference to work with the established relationships that we have with the women growers there in these
Okay.
regions.
All
So
right. Okay. Thank you.
thank you, Dr. Dacanay.
Any more questions from the group?
Cherry, may I ask?
Yes, sure, Miss Jean. Go
It's
ahead.
actually commenting, not so much asking.
Yes, po.
From my understanding of Sharon's presentation, I think it's the focus is actually how do you make women's empowerment real, women's economic empowerment real by producing, because there are different ways of doing gender development. So, and I think this is a subset in the gender and development work where you say, okay, we push for gender equality and women's empowerment. Here, we would like to focus on women's economic empowerment by helping them in their business, in how uh, they become more responsible, more responsible businesses. I think it's also like creating. Lisa uses intermediary. I think it's more like brokering the need of consumers and producers, especially during crisis and COVID.
Yes.
Did I get your? Did I understand?
Yes, that's a very good analysis, Ms. G. That's what you're doing right now. A lot of our farmers cannot be reached, and a lot of our manufacturers are having a hard time on reaching them. So we're trying to play the role of having them have a platform wherein they could engage, and then they could have we could deliver our goods. You know, a lot of our farmers are in areas where there are no roads. There's conflict. There's high incidences of COVID, and a lot of them are throwing away their harvest because of the disruption in the value chain. So a lot of them could not find a market. So what we're trying to do is make them be part of the value chain so that their goods will be delivered to areas where they're needed the most.
Yeah. Just a follow-up comment. So I think, Lisa, what happens here is that it's not the classic gender mainstreaming or
program.
gender
Yes, we're looking for a program that we have injected ourselves into the communities. No, what we're doing is we're vetting and we're trying to develop the relationship so that this would be effective in our deliverables.
I guess, Jean, the reason why I was actually
grappling.
asking those questions, grappling, is because from the perspective of what we've seen in communities, no, where there are intermediary marketing organizations, when you actually study the impact of how the intermediary marketing organizations have already that they create in relation to women's inclusion and women's economic empowerment, then I don't disagree that women's inclusion is happening, right? I'm just curious about how women's empowerment at the community level is really happening beyond the women-led enterprise itself, no? Or the women entrepreneur who's actually, being assisted to have to play that role as, as the entrepreneur who assists the community to have access to markets. So I'm actually not, I'm not discounting the benefits. I'm just curious about the impact on the women, small producers, for example, beyond the women entrepreneur, who leads the enterprise.
Yeah, okay. So when we're using your output outcome impact, M&E thing.
Yeah,
so a lot of it is the output, probably the outcome, but there's no measurement probably of what happens at the level of impact to the women entrepreneurs beyond the economic activity.
Well, the women entrepreneurs and the women small producers engaged by the women entrepreneur, yeah?
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
I'm just looking for that kind of relationship. But I think I'm impressed by I'm impressed by the business model actually. I
Yes,
think
yes.
there might be some room for maybe if the Morination is interested to actually look at how it could create greater impact at the community
Yes.
level, or even measure the impact at the community level, that we will be
Oh,
very interested to work with you.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
oh,
Yes.
yes, we're very interested, Dr. Dacanay. When you mentioned it, yes, right now we're working with agri-entrepreneurs. In the interest of time, when we have deliverables to the United Nations, for instance, they would give a 1 month 1 month window for us to deliver the goods immediately. So the impact is felt by maybe the agri-enterprises, but for us to go further into the communities, that's one thing. I think even Grow Asia would want us to look into the frameworks where we find impact in the small shareholder farmers themselves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. We would be glad to work with you.
Thank you, Dr. Dacanay. We really appreciate that.
Sharon, is it? Hello.
Yes, Miss Mary Joy.
Hi. Can I ask you a quick question? Because we have been helping farmers here in Tarlac. One of the issues that we have is that they can really produce quality products, but off-takers are very hard to come. When you say off-takers, these are kind of like um, off-takers that would be buying their products on a regular basis. No, so for example, the one product that they have here that is in big volume is root crops like sweet potato. There are times where sweet potatoes here would be 6 pesos per kilo, and the cost to harvest the sweet potato would be more than the 6 pesos. There were times where our calabasa or squash was only 3 pesos per kilo, and it would be more expensive to harvest those products because we don't have any off-takers or guaranteed off-takers where we can deliver this. So you said that you connect these farmers with guaranteed buyers. How do you do that, and how can you guarantee the volume that they produce?
I think that is also the problem with a lot of our farmers right now. That's why that's one of the interventions that our companies are that makes us makes our company also relevant. In the summit, in the UN Food System Summit, there was a measure. One of the suggestions they're saying is eliminate the middleman. But when you say eliminate the middleman, because they feel a lot of the participants feel that a lot of them are just taking advantage of the farmers. But when you talk about middlemen as social enterprises and they connect farmers to the institutional buyers and find ways for them to connect with them, and that I think there are a lot. It's a process that we can go through that we are willing
Ms.
to go through
Sharon,
with our community.
sorry
Yes,
to interrupt. We are now asked to go back to the plenary session.
I think Miss Cherry also have to
Plenary.
report also. Are you going to be a reporter? Miss,
No, no, no. In the interest of time, because we're supposed to end at 4 o'clock, others also have their respective commitments. We are doing away with the takeaways, but we will be sharing the presentation recordings and the contact information of speakers as may be requested,
I
and
think,
continue conversation through
and
that.
even with Miss Mary Joy, I think we need to continue the dialogue.
Yeah.
Yes, please, because we tried helping our farmers, and I try to help it. I'll help out, but in order for them to get the quality that is needed by the off-takers, it takes a lot of work. A lot of work.
Yes,
Uh,
that's true.
yeah, just even washing the sweet potatoes to make it.
Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to see all of you here, and it's also my pleasure to be moderating the breakout session with all of you today. So I think without any further ado, I see that the number of participants is still slowly climbing as people join the room, but I'd like to actually pass it directly over to Dr. Marianne Sayoc, who is going to be talking about experiences with her company, East West Seed, and then we'll move into an opportunity for you to ask questions of Marianne and a moderated discussion. Marianne, the floor is yours.
Okay, Thank you very much, Erin. Nice to see you here, and all the other participants in this breakout room. So, Ryan, may I have the slides, please? Can you hear me well, Erin? Is my audio good?
Yes, it's very good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a stormy, rainy afternoon, huh? That's why I was a bit worried. Okay. Yeah. Again, thank you very much to PPSA for having me here and giving me this opportunity to share with you the experience of East-West Seed on gender inclusive program. Next slide, please. Yeah. Yes, Ryan.
Wait, ma'am. Mali ata na-share ko. Sorry. Wait. Okay.
So, okay. While we're waiting for the slides, let me just give you a brief introduction, okay, about East-West Seed. We introduced a market-oriented plant breeding in Southeast Asia in 1982, developing improved vegetable varieties adapted to local markets and growing conditions. We were established 39 years ago. We have a direct presence in 11 markets. We export seeds to 60 countries, and we work on 60 crops and 973 varieties offered to smallholder farmers. Next slide, please. We serve about 20 million farmers worldwide. We have 17 R&D centers in 7 countries. Last year, we have trained 84,000 farmers despite the pandemic. And these are the recognitions we got the past years. We ranked #1 in the Global Access to Seed Index, and we were cited in the Fortune's annual Change the World list, ranking 28. And in 2019, our founder, Simon Groth, got the World Food Prize Award. So that's a little, next slide, please. Now, I would like to share with you actually on what we're doing in knowledge transfer. We believe that having quality seeds is not enough to improve the income of farmers. They have also to learn better farming practices so they can actually optimize the good genetic potential of improved varieties. So we have our knowledge transfer program and our approach. So the main purpose is to improve on-farm skills of smallholder vegetable farmers. And this is the approach. We work with development partners. So we broaden the impact and reach of our work through strong relationships with like-minded organizations. We catalyze markets through knowledge. And then we provide practical, tried and tested technical knowledge on improved farming practices. Next slide, please. I will not go through this. These are quick facts. I think Erin already discussed this in her presentation. So we can move forward then. Now, what is knowledge transfer doing with women farmers? Here, this is in 2020, quick facts from our knowledge transfer team in Indonesia. They said that 24% of the demonstration plots were from women. So that's not a really high percentage. Second fact is 1 out of 4 key farmers was a woman. And fact 3 is women farmers account for 44% of all trained farmers in the country. Next slide, please. Now, let me show you a specific project that we did in the Philippines. This was a vegetable farming anchored on good agricultural practices combined with natural farming systems project. We did this in 2019. up to 2020. It's a joint project of East West Seed, the World Wildlife Fund, and the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines. We worked with 7 communities in Lanao del Norte, North Cotabato, and Davao Province. We provided season-long training on vegetable production and the establishment of demonstration farms, which actually became the learning sites. The farmer field schools had 218 graduates across 7 sites. And this is interesting, and we're happy to note that of the 218 graduates, 64% were women, so 139 were women, and 36% were men. And we also conducted 24 technical field days. 2,244 individuals were exposed to the new technologies, new farming technologies. Out of this, 1,574 were women, so a good percentage, 70%, and 30% were men. Next slide, please. So you would see that, as Erin said, it really varies not among countries in Southeast Asia, how gender actually inclusivity and gender equality is a practice. Now, these are the major challenges identified by our knowledge transfer team across the East West Seed group. We have knowledge transfer programs in about 15 countries in Southeast Asia and in Africa. And so just going briefly through them, and I think this was also discussed already by Erin, culture norms sideline women. So it limits their access to knowledge, and women are not comfortable in training with mixed groups. It limits their movements. Women cannot go to meetings far from home. And men are main decision makers and control resources. So women do the work, but do not manage the results of their labor. And women do not directly participate in decision making. And it's a fact that women have little or no access to land, and women have limited access to finance, market, and inputs. Next slide, please. Now, how to outreach more women and invite them to participate actively in knowledge transfer activities. So this is what our KT team in a workshop actually came up with. Their recommendation is to make influential women in the village as a point of contact. Next, recruit and train rural extension workers in the village to be the proxy between between the women farmers and East West Seed KT staff. Increase the number of women technical field officers to reach out and train women. Contact and work with existing women groups like self-help groups and religious groups and cooperatives. Also, it would help you to inform village leaders and other community leaders, husbands, men from the family, and explain to them the program. And additional topics to encourage more interest, and especially on nutrition, vegetable recipes would be good, because as we know, women are actually the ones responsible for the food security and nutrition of the family. Next slide, please. Ryan, next slide, please. Okay, so these are just some of the photos of the project we did in Lanao. You see the women farmers actually, doing the transplanting, and this other photo is teaching them how to make natural pesticides. No? Okay, next slide, please. We have to understand and recognize workload and responsibilities of women in rural areas. So we need to adapt our training programs and how we deliver them. We need to be conscious about the time of training. So time them not during the peak hours where women, do their household chores. Also, place of training is important. Situate them as near to to their to the homes as possible. The length of training is also important. And it's good to have small groups to have more interactions. And on the training delivery, the KT team found out there's no difference in the knowledge shared between men and women. Women can become the repository or custodian of knowledge. Women can become very skilled in some technical subjects, and they adapt the support materials to their level, and they learn to train women with their children. So in some of the farmer field schools and the trainings that we conducted, women actually bring their children to the training. Okay, next slide, please. So this is some of the photos. You see, it's really an all-women group attending training. Next slide, please. So women farmers can be recognized by their community as key players in the economy of vegetable farming. So it's good to share success stories of women farmers in social gatherings or in social media, during field days, and even live program on radio and TV. Approach female vegetable sellers in local markets, create good relationship with local government extension officers, and together identify women farmers and support women to become rural entrepreneurs. So in our training programs, we also do an entrepreneurial training. We also connect them to the market. So once they've produced the vegetables, we connect them to institutional buyers. And I think one advantage, like in the Philippines, we have our knowledge transfer team are all women, 15 of them. We only have one guy in the team. And I think this is one of the reasons why we get more women participation, because they feel more comfortable dealing with women technical specialists. Next slide, please. So some of the pictures and the rich harvest. So adapt to the situation. So be flexible. Kitchen garden. Sorry. Can you go back to the previous slide? Kitchen garden could be an entry point for training women in some countries. And a small demo, one crop could be entry point in other countries. And use available materials for women demos if they cannot buy, and organize visit of women to agri-input dealers or link them, because of course these women will need inputs to make their vegetable production, more productive. So we have to create a supportive learning environment with the community and the family to train women in vegetable farming. Next slide, please. So these are now the women marketing their produce. Okay, next. So I just want to end with this slide. If women farmers had the same access to resources as men, the number of hungry in the world will be reduced by up to 150 million. I think this is the last slide, and thank you very much for your kind attention. I will, I have a few minutes to answer any question, because I already told Erin that I need to log out 10 minutes before, because I'm also facilitating another webinar. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marian. We're so glad that you were willing to give some time to join today's webinar and share with all the participants. Can I ask, because we have just 5 minutes left of Marian's time, if anyone has a burning question, please unmute yourself and you can go ahead and ask.
Mary, can I ask?
Let
me just start. I love this approach, right? And you said the women are bringing their children, which means they're younger women, I guess. What's your view? Because the standard view we know is that the young people, and that's usually the young boys or men, don't want to stay home because of course they want to get studies, and I think women too. So to what extent do you find when the women themselves get recognized, do their daughters then begin to think, maybe it's better if I don't go to the city to be in a slum, but I could really stay home and do this and learn and become productive, and get a better life. So what is the interaction with the younger women for the future?
Yeah, actually, most of the women participants we have normally bring the smaller children because they couldn't take care of themselves. Yeah, so it's really the smaller children. But it's very seldom that we get like the teenagers, no? So in that sense, but it's a very interesting what you are asking now, because perhaps if they see their mothers, no, being involved in this kind of activity and getting training, I think that would be that will open their eyes, and it will give them a good some useful insights that perhaps one day they could also even do better than their mothers.
Thank you. Yeah, good.
Thank you so much. I see Lorna has asked 2 questions. So Lorna, might I ask you to unmute and just ask one of the questions, whichever you prefer? And if not, I'm happy to ask. Yes, go ahead.
Probably I'll just ask the last one. Had in the project, anyway, the questions are up there. But the last one, if you were able in the project to monitor if the decision making in the household was impacted on or was enhanced, because I understand it's the males.
Yeah, yeah. I thank you for your question, Lorna. We were not able to monitor that aspect. In fact, well, we were only actually looking at from their attendance in the trainings that I think the decision for the men in the house to let the women attend the training is already something good. But as to the use of their resources, we were not able to monitor that. That's why I was really happy with what Ms. Catherine Sobrevega presented on the GEM framework, and I exchanged chat with her, and I said Eastward Seed will actually be very interested to use this framework. And Catherine said we have already been cooperating in Myanmar with MEDA, so we can do that also in the Philippines. So we will, thank you for the question. We will, I think it would be a good to monitor that as well. How does the decision making would could change if we empower women. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Marianne, would you have time to take one more quick question?
Okay, one more quick question.
Great, and maybe I'll just read it out to save time. So the question is from Elizabeth Delgado, and it's how was the participation or support of men in order to allow women to be the main recipients? So how did you manage that relationship between men and women farmers?
Yeah, I think we first actually conducted like a rapid assessment, like who will be interested in doing the training, and partnering with the NGOs, with the development organization, actually help us, put on the gender lens. So because sometimes, our team are really mostly focused on the technical aspects, but on community organizing, on the social aspect, then we rely a lot on our project partner. And so for this particular project, worldwide, the WWF actually did a lot on social preparation. So an assessment and getting the buy-in actually from the whole household. So that's why we got a very high percentage of women participants. And as I said, having women technical specialists, also help, they're more comfortable with women technical specialists.
Thank you so much, Marianne. And we managed to end right on time for your deadline. So thank you again for joining us. And I'm sure everyone really appreciated learning from you and the knowledge transfer program.
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, apologies, but I hope I could still, well, Erin, you can give them my email or whatever. I would be glad to share some more. So thank you very much. And again, apologies, I have to log off. Thanks, Erin.
No problem. Thank you so much, Marianne. Take care.
Bye.
Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye. And for everyone else, we can stay on the line. We have a few more minutes left in the breakout room. So I wanted to actually invite, if there's anyone in the breakout room now who also has an example of a gender inclusive project that you have worked on at your own company or organization, and just whether you could share one learning from that project. Is there anyone who'd be willing to share?
I could share if no one else.
Sure, Fifi, please. And if we can just keep each sharing to maybe about 1 minute, that would be perfect.
Sure. We did gender equality mainstreaming in one agri fintech, also in a microfinance institutions. We have done it quite successfully in the sense that the agri fintech now adopted gender lens mainstreaming in client outreach. Before they concentrated on men, but now they are aiming at women farmers. So by 2022 in June, they are targeting 16,000 women farmers in Indonesia. So to us, these are one of our greatest success in gender mainstreaming when the partner itself embrace the concept and they move it to another level.
Fantastic, Fifi. Thank you so much. And Fifi, if you're open to others getting in touch with you to learn more, please feel free to leave any contact information in the chat. Ms. Susan, I see that you've unmuted yourself. Were you interested in sharing?
Yeah. Hello. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Please go ahead.
I had opportunities of conducting trainings that empower women to develop their livelihoods. One issue that I observed in sustaining women empowerment is when we fail as trainers to help them connect with market opportunities.
Thank you so much, Susan. I think that's an incredibly important point, and I see that coming up in case studies across the region over and over. Did your program also have any kind of solutions to connecting to those market opportunities?
On my part, I am from the academe. On my personal capacity, I continue to help them. I had 2 occasions of helping them link with private SMEs. But for those occasions that I help them, and it's the private companies that eventually leave or terminate the partnership. And so I am back to a 0 level of sustaining women empowerment.
Thank you for sharing, and it definitely highlights the very real challenges of maintaining the kind of sustainability of these kinds of programs. Absolutely. I believe we have 1 minute left. Would anyone like to share in this final minute?
Well, if nobody else does, since I already spoke, okay? Let me just say, I'm a social anthropologist, so this is all very fascinating to me because I always study the side of how they feel, what are the other elements of behavior in addition to all the technical stresses. And I just wanted to point out one of the things. I worked in Africa and of course in the Philippines where I am. And that is that women like to work together, obvious for all the reasons we already know. But one element which is often not explicitly said is that related to this Lanao question, they don't want the husbands to make more trouble by getting jealous, because if they work with males in any way, regularly, they're outside the house, especially if it involves meetings at night, the husband goes after them, with jealousy, and that's very hard for them to deal with. So I'm just saying that some of these factors really need to be studied at the same time as all the technical challenges they have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a really important point. And I could see that Lorna has actually responded directly to your sharing, Mary. Lorna, did you want to unmute yourself and add anything to this point?
No, really, but it's just what I have written there. Just keep the men in the loop. So it's like buy-in from everyone else, not create any more divisions, since there is always that risk.
Absolutely. I think it's a challenge that can be kind of overlooked in some programs and some cases. Catherine, were you going to add something? I saw you just unmuted yourself.
Yeah, we have the same. We have this experience working with women only in Afghanistan and Pakistan. How do the men react to it? I think that's one. Usually when we go to this conservative country, they will just say, we just want women to work with our women. So it's good that we have field officers that are just women, so they just, that's the trust. But then you need to put the men on the loop. So we also have like a project officer that just talking to the men, they're just updating the men. What are we there for, a meeting, things like that. So I think that's one of the things that we need to consider as well when we're just doing a women's only project.
Very good. Good point.
Jay, in the interest of time, maybe Sherry can provide the final key takeaway, and then we'll close the session. Thank you.
Okay. Over to you, Cherry.
Thank you, Ams and BJ. I think we're happy to observe that gender is still a very juicy topic from among the participants, given that there's a lot of questions, clarifications that remained not fully satisfied because of time constraints. But then this conversation will continue as we share to you the presentation, recording, and of course, you have the liberty to contact the speakers and other participants in the room that you may find useful for your own respective intentions or endeavors for gender mainstreaming. What we are getting is that while the gender inclusive practices is still nascent at this stage, there's still a lot of opportunities. And what's good is that we recognize these areas for improvement. And we are happy to see that this platform has been an opportunity for everyone to improve know-how on the network and the ways that they can move forward to pursue gender inclusive practices from this point forward. So I think that's what can I that's my take on the session. Thank you, VJ.
All right. Thank you so much, Sherry. And of course, to our speakers, Erin, Miss Catherine, Doc Lisa, Miss Sharon, Doc Mary Ann, and of course, Christine for sharing with us your knowledge, your insights, and of course, your experiences in managing gender inclusive programs. So again, we would also like to thank our participants for their active participation. And of course, thank you for staying in the session. We will release all the materials, be it the presentations and the recordings, through our social media channels. And of course, we will email all the attendees of those materials. And of course, however, to those who ask, we will not release certificates, but we will definitely share with you the group photo as a proof that you attended the session. All right. Again, thank you so much, and keep safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you po.
Thank you.